Hi, thanks for joining us again with the online Bible studies here at Meriden. I want to continue our study on the Christian Church um, and its purpose and function. Today I want to use a text from Acts chapter 2, verses 42 to 47 for our study. And it says, "They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, to fellowship, and to the breaking of bread, and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe with the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions and gave to all who had in need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes, ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved." You might like to have your Bibles open at that text for this talk and for the study later, the discussion. From this text we can identify four basic elements or marks of the church. In his book, The Living Church, John Stott suggests that from this text we see four essentials of the church. And he suggests they are firstly a learning church. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching. They are a caring church. They devoted themselves to fellowship, to the breaking of bread, and to prayer. They're a worshipping church. It says that every day they continue to meet together in the temple courts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And they were an evangelizing church. They were constantly reaching out with the message of Jesus. And the Lord added to their number daily those who are being saved. But today I just want to focus on the element of fellowship. The Greek word used for this is koinonia, and I'm sure you're familiar with that. Note it says they devoted themselves to the fellowship. In other words, it was a priority. It was one of their core values. The term koinonia means to hold something in common. In our last session, I quoted the parable of the life-saving stations, highlighting how becoming a social club had taken over their role as lifesavers. Now, the illustration could give the impression that the social interaction, the social fellowship of the members was somehow invalid. That wasn't the point of the illustration. Rather, how the central important role of rescuing the lost had been replaced by social fellowship. Developing good facilities and providing a positive environment for those they rescued was beneficial to their overall work. The common purpose was to save lives and also to help clean them up and get them healthy again. But this work didn't exclude the social fellowship. In between rescues, they could do things at the club, at the centre, and improve the conditions. So thinking about how this relates to the church, fellowship is an essential part of the life of the church, as well as our outreaching into the community. How can we enjoy social fellowship without sacrificing our primary purpose of reaching the lost? We'll talk about that in the discussion group. When we refer to Christian fellowship, we're not just talking about the cuppa and the chat after church or being a social club, or these are part of the whole concept of fellowship. So the Christian fellowship is expressed in a variety of ways. It's meeting together, worshipping together, praying together, sharing meals and supporting each other. And Paul teases this out in Romans 12:10-13 when he says, "Be devoted to one another in love, honor one another above yourselves. Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor, serving the Lord. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer, sharing with the Lord's people who are in need, and practice hospitality." You notice in verses 44-45 in Acts 2, it says all the believers were together and had everything in common, selling properties and possessions to give to anyone who had in need. There is a deep caring support for each other. Acts 4 tells us more, that all the believers were one in heart and mind. No one claimed to have any possessions that were their own, but shared everything they had. And it says in verse 3 that there were no needy persons among them. Now, it's important to keep in mind that at that time there was no welfare system, no retirement pension. If you hadn't saved up money, when you got sick or got old, you were in trouble. Your family looked after you if you couldn't work. So if you had no family, you were in poverty, either doing whatever work you could or dependent on charity. Note that John Stott referred to this as a caring church. So these believers, those first Christians, took it upon themselves to make sure that everyone was cared for. And there are multiple examples in Acts where we see the local believers caring for each other, like the widows and orphans. And John Stott says in his book, generosity has always been a characteristic of the people of God, for our God is a generous God. Now, there's a lot of overlap in all of these elements or marks of the church. They devoted themselves to worship together. We often even hear people say that you don't have to go to church to worship God. And of course, this is true. However, worshipping God together both strengthens our worship and encourages each other in our faith. There is rich fellowship in corporate worship. We can pray alone, and that's good. But praying together in a small group both strengthens our prayer and deepens our fellowship. To pray with and for each other is a great encouragement. We have said many times that the Christian life and the Christian journey was never meant to be a solo experience. When God created Adam, God declared, "It is not good for a man to be alone." I don't think this was just about having a wife or a husband, but having companionship. God said, it's good to have a helper. I'm convinced after 40 years or so of ministry that, as John Stott puts it, small groups are indispensable for our growth into spiritual maturity and being a healthy, growing church. So Christian fellowship is not an optional extra for the Christian, but vital for their spiritual health and growth. Well, thank you for listening, and I hope this has been helpful as we explore the issue. Now, here are some questions for you to discuss, or you could just disregard these and chat about anything you want. It's up to you. Firstly, how has fellowship helped you in your Christian life? Secondly, last week we had the illustration of the lifeboat stations. Their common purpose was saving lives, but didn't exclude fellowship in between rescues. How could they enjoy social fellowship without sacrificing their primary purpose, and how does that relate to us as a church? The third question, discuss the statement, the Christian life, the Christian journey was never meant to be a solo experience. God said of Adam, it is not good for man to be alone. Was it just about having a wife or a husband, or as well having companionship and friends? And fourthly, why do you think so many Christians avoid church? Well, thanks again for listening. I hope this has been helpful, and may God enrich you in your fellowship together. God bless.